Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this session today on new workflows in the Leganto new UI. For those of you who I haven't already met, my name is Jessie Ransom. You may have seen on the listserv that Delav Benartzi has decided to leave Ex Libris, so I have taken over as the Leganto product manager. I'm not new to Leganto. I've been working with Leganto for about 5 or 6 years now. Previously, I worked kind of in between the product team and our libraries, the customers using Leganto. I had a focus on the workflows aspect, kind of helping configure the system to do the types of things that you wanted to do. So this topic here of new workflows in the new UI is very near and dear to my heart. I'm happy to be covering this today. What we're going to be doing today, first of all, I'm going to start with a little bit of an introduction about the rollout. We've gotten a lot of questions. We got a lot of questions during Delav's previous session on the new UI, as well as after, about the rollout and various things. So I'm going to cover that a little bit. And then we'll go through two workflows specifically. The My List is Ready workflow, which is brand new. So if you don't know what that means, that's fine. But we're going to cover that, and then we're going to cover the rollover and duplicate workflow. These are really the biggest workflow changes that we've made, and depending on what you're doing today, they may or may not be especially big, but these are the biggest workflow changes that we've made. In general, we really wanted the UI to be familiar for people who are used to using Leganto. So we cleaned up some workflows, we made smaller tweaks to help streamline things, but these two are the bigger changes that we've made. So we really want to make sure that you're aware of them, that you know what the different options are, and that you're ready to start using them. We will have time for questions at the end. You can use the chat for your questions. You don't have to wait until the end to put your questions in. And if you do have a question, I recommend you put it in right away so that you don't forget. You don't have to worry that I might cover it later. Even if I'm going to, I'm happy to see your question. I have them open, so I may even see them as I'm talking, and we can cover them kind of with what we're doing. But we'll have the questions. I'll also say we are recording the presentation, and I will share the slides with you as well. So there's a lot of slides and kind of walking through a lot of different options, but I wanted you to be able to see what all of this looks like. I'm not showing it in the slides today, but the slides have the configurations as well. So when I share the slides with you, you'll have that information also. So let's go ahead and dive in here with the rollout timeline. So again, this is something that we got a lot of questions about. So I just want to try to clear up any concerns about this or any confusion about this. So where we are right now is that the UI is being tested. The new UI is being tested by our early adopters. Early adopters have had access to it since June, and they've been doing some pretty serious testing. So many thank yous to any early adopters that are on this call. We've gotten, I checked yesterday, and it was over 500 comments from the 15 institutions that are our early adopters. So that's been really great. It's been just wonderful to see that feedback and to work with this group of people. So they're working hard for you. The UI will be available to all institutions, all of you, beginning in September. So in September, you'll be able to start testing the new UI. And you can test it while you're still using the current UI. You'll be able to test it on production, which means you'll be able to look at your existing lists, your existing configurations, existing labels. You'll be able to see exactly what it will look like for you in your environment set up the way that you have set it up. So you'll be able to do that. You can work in, any individual user can work in, the new UI as much as they want while your, general users, your instructors and your students are still using the current UI. And then when you're ready, you can switch. So we will keep both versions available for a year. So you'll have, technically you'll have a year to begin to do the testing, although our plan, our expectation, our hope is that you'll align the switch with your academic break. So, we timed it such that institutions will have a couple of months to test it, and then make the switch during an academic break. Moving forward, most of our development will be focused on the new UI. So if you are thinking about switching, next summer, this is something to be aware of, that a lot of what we're doing in the meantime will really be focused on that new UI. I do expect that many of you are in that situation. So I wanted to point this out, that's what's going to be happening moving forward. Just so you know, I have a number of screenshots in the slides today. I used the September release to take these screenshots. So we'll be looking today at exactly the same kind of system that you'll have access to in September. And the other thing that we'll make available in September, the other things I should say, are listed here. Technically, only the first one is actually going to be new in September, this Getting Started guide. So this includes the information that you'll need about how to access the new UI, how to test it out. There are a couple of different ways that you can access it, so we'll make that information available. The Getting Started guide also highlights some of the bigger changes that we've made. If you've been following other webinars up to this point, you may already know that, as an example, we renamed the collection, or my collection, to favorites. So the Getting Started guide points out those types of things, some of the bigger things that have happened. It certainly does not point out all of the changes that we've made, but some of the kind of big ones that we want to make sure you're aware of are listed in there. It also includes workflows to review. Really, this is what we're covering today, are these workflows. And then also some configurations. And some of those configurations are related to the new workflows, but also there's some places where we've highlighted where, because of the changes that we made in the new UI, our best practices recommendations may have changed. Previously, we may have recommended that you turn something off, and now we may recommend that you turn it on, those types of things. So we'll have that in the Getting Started guide as well. There's also a frequently asked questions page and a known issues page. And the known issues is right now primarily for those early adopters. So it lists some of the bugs or things that we have changed based on the feedback, or plan to change, I should say, based on the feedback that we've gotten from our early adopters. It also includes some of the features that are still to be developed. So the September release of the new UI doesn't include everything that's in the current Leganto UI. So where there are features that aren't in the September release, we list out when we anticipate that they'll be available. So you can take a look at that, and you'll also be able to see the features that have been removed. So there are a few things that are in the current UI of Leganto that will not be in the new UI. For different reasons. Some of them are just not as relevant as they were when we first developed them. Some of them we've removed because they're not used. So you can see that information as well if you're curious about that. So these resources will all be available to you with that September release. So when you get access to it, you'll also get these additional resources. So hopefully that helps clarify some of the confusion about what's actually happening in September. You certainly don't have to switch in September. You can, if you want to, please reach out and let us know that that's your plan. But our expectation is mostly that people will start testing it in September. So let's go through these workflows now. And the first thing that I'm going to cover is the My List is Ready workflow. When Delov did the previous presentation, there were a lot of comments about the My List is Ready button and the banner and things like that. So I wanted to take this time to really go through this workflow and explain what's happening and explain the different options that are available. So what we have done in the new UI is replaced the publish and the send list buttons. We got a lot of feedback about instructors not realizing that they needed to do both, or not knowing what the next step was after they built their list. They sent the list to the library, but they forgot to publish it, or they published the list and they forgot, then they updated it and forgot to send it to us again. So this is what kind of triggered this change, is we really wanted to streamline that list creation workflow so that instructors would know what the next step was when they were ready for it. Of course, we know also that all of you are using Leganto in slightly different ways. You have kind of different relationships with your instructors and different ways that you support them in the list the list creation, the list processing workflow. So there are 4 options for how you can use this. And I'm actually going to go through all of them today. So I hope it's not like information overkill. But I wanted you to be able to see exactly what those 4 options are. And I actually have screenshots of all of the steps with the 4 options, which I did on purpose because the way to see this is to change your configuration 4 times and then kind of walk through it. And I didn't want all of you to have to do that to sort of test this and figure out what would be the best fit for you. So I did that in advance. So we'll go through the 4 options and I'll kind of talk about what they look like from a workflow perspective. The first option is that the instructor sends the list to the library and they actually don't have the option to publish the list. So this is great in situations where your library needs to review things or wants to review things before they get published to students. The instructor can send it to the library can do the review, and then the library would publish the list. So this is option number 1. Option number 2 is actually the default in the new UI. So the instructor sends the list to the library, and they also have the option to publish it at that point, or they can publish it later if they prefer. The third one is that the instructor publishes the list. Like from their perspective, that's what they're doing. They're making their list available to the students, and then the library is kind of behind the scenes in this workflow. So the list gets sent to you behind the scenes, but it's not as obvious to the instructor that that is a step in the process. So if your library is kind of quietly supporting access to these resources, or just quietly checking these things or not checking these things, this is a good option in that situation. As far as the instructor knows, they're building a list for students, they're sharing that list with students, and then you're kind of quietly supporting them behind the scenes. And then the fourth option is that all lists are published by default. So there isn't a publishing process that the instructor or the library needs to do. This just happens by default. So I'll cover all of these options. Once the list is published for any of these options, for all of these options, once it's published, any changes that are made are automatically sent to the library. So if it's published and then they add new resources that require library review, those will be sent to you automatically. And that's true for all of the different options. So I'm going to go through them now. And the first option here is, as I said, the instructor sends it to the library and the library publishes the list. For the sake of time and also for the fact that you need to change all of these configuration options to see it, I'm using screenshots here. So we'll walk through screenshots rather than the live demo. I just took all the screenshots again on the September release so that you could see it. But again, I will share this with you as well. So you'll be able to, I know we're kind of early, you may not be making these decisions yet, but when you're ready, you'll be able to look at all of these again and make sure that you're picking the one that's the best fit for you. So here we go. So now we're looking at the new UI. And if you haven't seen it yet, this will be your first peek. We won't see a lot of it today because I'm using these screenshots, but if you haven't seen it, this will also be a good chance to kind of get the look and feel of the new UI, to see some of the changes that we've made. So as you create a new list, and essentially what I did before I took these screenshots is I just created a new list. And up here, we can see this banner. Then this is new in the new UI. So the banner displays anytime a list is not published, this banner displays. And this option 1 version says your list hasn't been sent to the library and isn't visible to students. Click on My List is Ready to send it to the library. So we really wanted instructors, we wanted this to be very clear to instructors that they weren't done, basically. While I'm building this list, while I'm adding these resources to the list, I do have kind of a final step that I need to take. So that's where this banner came from. And I'm walking you through today the default texts for this banner, for this button. There's some other places where we'll see text as well. You can, of course, customize these. So if you don't like, if you don't like My List is Ready as a button and you want this to say send instead, or send to library or something else, you can do that. So you can certainly change these buttons. Just a couple other things to point out. Up here, we can see that this is in draft status, so it's not published right now. And we can also see that there's a couple citations that are in draft status. And this is new. We changed this label. So the label in the current UI, or the out-of-the-box label at least, is being prepared. So draft is the equivalent of being prepared. There's a lot of things like this in the new UI where we looked at, existing labels and we thought, or we talked to instructors, does this make sense? And being prepared, who is preparing this? So we got a lot of feedback about the being prepared. We've switched this to the draft status. So we can see that there's a couple that are in draft right now. Let me go ahead and I'm going to say my list is ready. You can see now that there's a pop-up, send the list to the library will review it and publish it to students. So again, in this situation, the instructor doesn't actually have any publish permissions. We can send this to the library. We get a little confirmation here that it was sent to the library, and the banner message changes now. So it says the library is reviewing your list. If you make additional changes, click on the button again, basically. It's still in draft. We haven't published it yet, but you can see the citation statuses have changed. So now they say library processing. This is also a label change that we made. So previously this would say sent. That would have been the status. So the sent status is now library processing, reflecting again kind of what the instructor needs to know in this situation. Sent was not as clear here. So instead, we have this library processing status. And maybe a note about the labels. Where the label in the old UI is exactly the same as the label in the new UI, we copied any customizations that you had. So if you had previously customized the sent label to be something else, yeah, that's what you'll see in the new UI. You'll see your customizations. If you've done translations, you'll see your translations. There are a lot of new labels in the new UI where the text was not the same. Actually, so my sent is a bad example. So because we changed this, complete, let's say you customized complete. Complete is the same in the old UI as it is in the new UI. So if you had customized that, that would display. Whereas library processing is actually a new label because it's not exactly the same as what it was. So if you don't like library processing, that's one that you'll need to change. So there's a question in the chat about how the library gets notified. These would come to you in your task list. So I have some that are marked as complete, and those you can still see them in Alma, but they wouldn't be in the task list as things to work on. These are the ones that don't mark as complete automatically, and those are the ones that are sent to the library. They come in to your Alma task list. We didn't actually make any changes to the way that the workflows work inside of Alma. We have exactly the same Alma workflows that we always did with the new UI. What's changing here is the kind of instructor side or the list creation side and the workflows there. So let me go on to the next one now. So the next workflow is option 2. Instructor can send the list and they have the option to publish it. So same list. Here I have the same banner actually, and I can say my list is ready, and we can see a different message in this case. So we're sending the list to the library will review it, and I do also have the option to publish it if I want to or if I'm ready. And for the first time, I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to send it to the library. This is actually exactly the same as what happened before. The list is still in draft status. The banner has changed. The library is reviewing your list. The citations were sent to the library, so they switched over to the library processing status. And then when we're ready to publish it, or if we need to send it again, I'll say because this is not published, the changes will not automatically be sent to the library. They're only automatically sent when the list is published. So in this case, they wouldn't be automatically sent. I can click on the My List is Ready again. I took an early screenshot here, but once you check this checkbox that says also publish the list to students, then you would see, depending on what you've configured, the instructor would see the different publishing options. And this will use your current configuration for publishing options. So today you can publish whether they see you can configure whether they see all 3 publishing options as we do here. You can also say what the default is going to be. There's an option to say only what the default is, and they don't have an option to change it. So we kept all of those configuration options that are available. We removed the advanced publishing option. So if you don't know what this means, that probably means you're not using it and it doesn't impact you. But if you are using the advanced publishing options, then what you see in the current UI is actually 6 different options. So there's 3 lines, and then there's checkboxes in 2 columns. If I've lost you, you're probably not using it. Not very many people were using it, but also we found that it was very confusing for instructors to have 6 different options, and that they didn't understand, the implications of whatever choices they made in those advanced publishing options. We do still have behind the scenes options for you to configure. It's really about what happens with the files. Are files available only to students in the course, or are they available to everybody? So you can still configure that for your institution, but it doesn't, and you can actually change it on the Alma side as well, but it doesn't display to instructors anymore. So that's one example of something that we have removed here. But otherwise, we can see these publishing options depending on your configuration. I can choose to publish it. We get this little message here that it was published, and this is actually an animation. It doesn't look good in a kind of flat screenshot, but there's an animation that displays here, and then we'll see that the list is published. So the status now is published. There's actually a tooltip if I hover over this that would show who can see it, all students at the institution or anybody. And then you can see that the banner is gone. So once it's published, that banner is removed. Anything that we add after will automatically be sent to the library. So you can't tell that I did this, but I added this example and I sent it to the library. There's a couple questions in the chat here, so I'm going to pause for a minute and take these. There are a few that I am going to answer later, so I'm skipping those. So if it feels like I'm skipping you, it's because I will get to it. So how does the library get notified? Is there any work happening to get emails or other forms of notification? So the notification for the library is still the task list. That's not changing with the new UI. This would be a good thing for Ideas Exchange. I don't think there is one on Ideas Exchange related to this. There is an email notification that's one of the NAIRS requests for this year. It's specifically to get an email notification when a link is marked as broken. So this is something that we're working on through the NAIRS process, but otherwise there aren't any email notifications related to these Alma tasks. So that hasn't changed. That's still the Alma task list. There's a question, are draft citations visible to students if the list is published and no action by the library has been taken yet? This is based on your configurations. So you can specify whether, this is actually a good example of the list that we're looking at right now. These top 3 are all library processing, but my list is published. So you can configure whether students can see citations that are not complete, and you can also configure which statuses they can see. So if you don't want them to be able to see these items, you can set it up that way. If you do want them to be able to see these items, you can set it up that way. There's a question, what button do instructors use to publish later? It is still the My List is Ready button. So let me back up a couple slides here. We'll unpublish this list. So I'm back in my draft status. So if I wanted to make more changes, here I have this My List is Ready button, and that opens up this, this pop-up again. And then that's where you can check the box to publish later. Will we still be able to delay visibility for students? No, actually, this is one of the things that we have removed from the new UI is the option to set those visibility dates. So you can publish the list, you can unpublish the list, you can publish lists in bulk, and you can also publish lists based on the course dates. So there's different bulk options for working with publishing lists. At the individual citation level, you can hide citations. It's just a checkbox now to hide them. So we don't have the specific dates, but if you do have situations where, for whatever reason, something shouldn't be available to students, even though the library work is done, there are different options for that. If the teaching faculty makes additional changes and click on My List is Ready to notify the library, would library staff know what has been changed and how the updated version differs from the previous one? If the library staff can tell the difference, it would save our time instead of reviewing the whole list again and again. So this is actually a question not as much about the new UI, but more about library workflows in general and processing workflows in general. So I don't want to cover it in too much detail, but one thing that I'll say as a recommendation is that you should mark things as complete when you're done, and some other status when you're not done, so that you know that you're working on the things that are in the not complete status. We do have training materials related to this topic about processing course materials. I can put some links in the chat here toward the end of the session. Let me just make a note for myself. I may forget, but I know we have some training materials available about this topic of how to work with lists and how to know what you still need to work on. But nothing about that has changed with the new UI. All right, let's go into the third option here. So the third option is that the instructor publishes the list. And this is the one where the kind of from the instructor's perspective, the library is more behind the scenes, less prominent, that it's less prominent that you're sending the list to the library. So here's option 3, same list, same situation. We have a slightly different banner message here. So your list hasn't been sent to the library and isn't visible to students. Click on My List is Ready to publish your list. So we have kind of a different next step here. I can click on My List is Ready and we can see now just the publishing options. So again, this is based on your configuration. There's also a comment here that your list will also be sent to the library for review. We are making some formatting changes to this screen, so you'll see that in a future release. We're going to move the formatting so that that second line stands out more. But this is also, again, text that you can customize. So depending on what your library does or how prominent you want that work to be, you can customize this text. If your library actually doesn't do a review, for example, you can change this text so it doesn't refer to the library at all. So again, this is something that you can customize, but from the instructor perspective, what they're really doing here is just publishing the list to students. They're building a list, they're publishing it to students. So I can publish it, we get that same animation here, and then again, the indication that this is published. Anytime the list is published, that banner message disappears. The list is kind of considered done. From that point, students can see it, and any new changes, of course, would be sent to the library again. So those are the 3 options that are new with the new UI. And those are the 3 options that really replace that send and publish workflow, combining it into one workflow. There is a 4th option, as I said, and this is something that actually already exists today. It came out not that long ago, a few months ago, earlier this year, but you can have lists automatically published when they're created. And this is for lists that are created in the Leganto UI. So it's meant to capture those lists that are created by your instructors or library staff, of course, but to skip that step entirely, that these lists are just always published. I'll say this is being used by different institutions in different situations, but if you're wondering about this, one way to think about this is if your students primarily access reading lists through the learning management system, when do they get access to this? It may not matter that they can access a list before it's actually built or before it's actually done, if they don't have access to it anyway. So this is a great way to kind of skip that extra step that sometimes gets missed or gets missed today, and just publish the lists. So I have some screenshots here working through this workflow. This is the new create list screen, create a new list from scratch. So you can see similar options to what we have today. But something that I did want to point out here is that with the new UI, we now have the option to link it to a course right away. This is another thing that we got a lot of feedback on, and I think this is a really nice example of some of the types of changes that we made with the new UI. When I said in the beginning, we made kind of smaller tweaks to the workflows, this is a good example of that. This was an extra step that instructors needed to take to link it to the course. It was a step that often got missed. We heard a lot of feedback about lists that were not linked to courses. It's still optional here, so I don't have to do it. Maybe this actually isn't for a course, or maybe I, for whatever reason, am not ready to do that. But we did add this link to course to the list creation screen. So if I am creating this for a course, I can just do that here as part of a single step. We can do create list, and you can see now I have a blank list that's already in the published status. So this is what it looks like if you're using this fourth option. As soon as the list is created, it's automatically published. And when I add new resources, they'll be sent to the library. So in this case, we don't see that banner message because it's already published, but also the instructor doesn't need to do anything. The list is published and the items are just going to be sent to the library automatically. For all of these options, there is still the option to unpublish the list. So assuming you haven't hidden it, this is always an option. If for whatever reason I, as the instructor or the list creator, made a mistake, don't want to publish it, I can do that. And then we would just see this banner message again. So it just starts the process over again. If you do have your system configured to publish by default, this is something to be aware of, that you may still want to configure your preferred option for what happens in case instructors unpublish a list. I don't know how common this will be, but it is something to think about. But that's still an option, is I can start over again if I want to. I talked about this for quite a long time because I wanted to walk through all of these options. I wanted you to see them all. Again, this is something that we got a lot of questions about from the previous webinars. This My List is Ready button, uncertainties about the text of the button or the banner. So hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what's happening behind the scenes. This slide here is just a summary. It's no new information. These are just the 4 options. Again, hopefully one of these options will work for all of you. Again, we wanted this to be easier for your instructors. Once you select an option, it's very easy to just walk through this workflow. But again, hopefully there's enough flexibility here for the situations that you have. This slide here is, if you're not sure which option is right for you, some things to think about. I think I already kind of addressed this earlier, but do you want instructors to be able to publish lists? So if the answer to that is no, then it should be very clear, that you have an option for that. How prominent is that library processing work? If you do want to be kind of sitting quietly behind the scenes, you can do that. Do you encourage them today to send lists to you before they're done, like to send them to you in stages as they're working, but before they're published? In this case, option 2 may be a good fit for you. So this is just something to think about if you're not, very clear which option is the best fit for you. There's a couple more questions in the chat, so let me take those now. So at the moment, we have both the publish and the send to library button. This means that instructors publish the list and then have the option to send the list to the library, but they don't have to. About half of the instructors use the send to library button and the others only publish the list. Is it possible to configure this in some way? It is not, actually. This is a workflow that we don't support in the new UI, that instructors can publish it, but the library doesn't get those changes. I'm going to, let me just stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to put an email address in the chat. We would be happy to take more feedback about this, or to better understand how you're using this today, what the implications would be for you. Sorry, I'm trying to find this email address. We have, should have had this handy. So there's a Leganto customer feedback email address, which I'm going to put in the chat. Let's see, for everybody. So you can use this email address. It goes to the product team. That's who will receive this email. And we'd be happy to hear more about kind of, like I said, your workflows and what it means for you that this is no longer an option. Let me share my screen again here. And I need to get the chat. But the answer to that question is no, we actually don't have a way to support that today. Okay, so next, what changes trigger citations being sent automatically to the library? And is there an option to automatically send the list to the library rather than individual citations? So let me actually go back in my slides here and just want one here. This will be a good one. So this is one that's published. So when you click on the what was formerly send list, where essentially it's my list is ready, but we're sending, at that point, you're sending the whole list to the library. So that is today sending a whole list. When we say individual citations will be sent, so if after the list is published, the instructor adds something that is not automatically marked as complete, that will be sent to you immediately. So that is sending an individual citation to the library. And this would go, you would obviously see it if you work list by list, if you're filtering those lists to the things that are not complete. On the library side, this is in the ready for processing status. So that's the status that you would see on the library side is ready for processing, unless you've customized it to be something else, but the default is ready for processing. And then similarly, the list is also in that ready for processing status. So today, there is a configuration for this where you can say once the list is published, any new things that need to be reviewed should be sent to the library. We've essentially taken that configuration as the default configuration. So if the list is not published, I can send, let me just back up here. Here, this is a situation. The list is not published, but maybe I already sent it. So actually the message would be a little bit different. So I can send the whole list if it's not published, but if it is published, it sends individual citations. They would go into the task list for individual citations. They would also go into, they're still in the list itself. So they'd be in the list itself with that default ready for processing status. Again, if this doesn't align with your workflows as you're doing them today, please feel free to let us know. We can talk about different options and what might make sense for you with when you switch to the new UI. There's a question here about uploading the syllabus. I'm getting to this one, so I'm going to skip this one for now. But I think that's all the questions I see. So let's keep going. I'm going to skip through these slides because we already covered them, so bear with me. And we're going to get now into the second workflow, which is the rollover and duplicate workflow. So now we're 30 minutes in on one workflow. We'll cover the next one. Again, once you configure this, hopefully they will not be this complex. It's just that there's different options and that this is new. So the second one is the rollover and duplicate workflow. These today exist in the UI as two separate steps. So the screenshot in the back here shows what we have today. Depending on your configuration, there's an option to duplicate a list and there's the option to roll over a list. And what we've done in the new UI is we've combined those into one option. We were really looking for a way to clarify for instructors when they would use one option or the other. This was feedback that we got from the instructor perspective. Do I want to duplicate or do I want to roll over? So we couldn't come up with a way that didn't involve a lot of text, a lot of explanation about, in this situation, you would do this, and in this situation, you would do this. So there was either a lot of text to explain it or additional training happening kind of outside of the system. And that's something that we were really trying to avoid in the new UI. We were really sort of across the board looking for ways that we could streamline that instructor work, make it easier to just get started in the system and kind of know what you were supposed to do without some of this additional confusion. So this is a good example of that. From the perspective of the instructor, what they're trying to do in both of these situations is copy a list. So that's really where this came from. Separately, we also got a lot of feedback from libraries about the fact that the rollover creating a copy through Rollover worked differently than creating a copy through Duplicate. So an example of this is that the citation statuses on the copied list are not necessarily the same as the citation statuses on a rolled over list. So we were also taking this into consideration, the feedback that we got from libraries about this. So technically behind the scenes, what we've done in the new UI is that we're using the instructor rollover functionality, but the label for it is called Duplicate. So that's how we've combined it. Again, I'll walk through this, but this is what's happening in the new UI. So there's one option for making a copy of the list. We went with rollover as the functionality because it gives you more control. It gives you more control over how the copy is created. And depending on your configuration, it can also give instructors control as well over how the copy is created and what the information is in there. So this is what it looks like in the new UI. Again, another peek. This is the list menu. So up at the top here, I've clicked on the menu, and we can see the option to duplicate. I will say again, this is a label that you can customize. So if today you have worked very hard to train your instructors to look for rollover, you can change this label. We were looking for something that would make sense for new instructors, for people who are new to the system, who are not at all familiar with it. And from that perspective, we thought that duplicate was the better language to use. But again, if your instructors are used to the language rollover, then you can certainly change this. You could call it rollover. You can change it to duplicate / rollover, duplicate parentheses rollover. If you know instructors are looking for that specific language, you can customize this label to use the language that they're used to. But I can click on duplicate, and then once I do that, I again get this screen about creating a new list. There's a couple things I want to point out. The list name up here includes parentheses rolled over. This exists today. So in the current UI, if you have enabled instructor rollover, it automatically adds this label. And our getting started guide actually recommends changing this label to something else. So you could change it to in parentheses or copy in parentheses. You can change it to something else again if that language of rolled over is not language that your instructors are going to be looking for or familiar with. So this, I just wanted to point out, you can change this. If you're not really emphasizing rolled over, we would recommend that you do change this. I have down here some advanced settings, and they're hidden by default. So as an instructor, if I want to make a copy of this list, I can click on duplicate and I can click on create list. And that's all I have to do to make a copy of this list. But again, there's some different options that are available here. So I again have the option to link to a course. And if you do select a link to a course, I feel like now I'm going to get into a lot of if you have it configured to work this way. So if you do select a link to a course, there's potentially, if you've configured it to display, a question here about the shareable links, about the permalinks. This is one of the most powerful things that happens during the rollover process, or that can be configured to happen during the rollover process. And that's that the links, the permalinks or the shareable links, in any link that you have to the old list can automatically point to the new list. So this is really great if you have a lot of links, permalinks inside the learning management system, inside the syllabus, inside a website, wherever you may have not LTI links, but permalinks, shareable links. Those links can automatically point to the new list. So this is one of the most powerful things that happens, but you may or may not want this to happen. And there's a difference in terms of when you might want this to work. So if you're creating a copy of this list because I taught it last year and now I'm teaching it again, you would want those links to point to the most current version of the list, so I don't have to update everything in my course or in my syllabus. On the other hand, if I'm teaching 3 sections of the course, they're all being taught simultaneously, I want to make 3 different copies of the list, you probably wouldn't want the links to point to the new list. So this is what we have, is that if you want it to display, again, you can configure this to be hidden, but if you want it to display, then there's an information box here. It's a little bit blurry because I zoomed it in quite a lot, but it says essentially what I just said. If you're still using this, such as in a current course, you probably want to say no. If you're updating an older list from a previous course, you probably want to choose yes. So we do make a recommendation here for different situations. The advanced settings themselves, once you click on that and expand it, this is based on your configuration. So your library can configure which options will display to instructors and also what the defaults are going to be for these. Again, is that the idea here is that a lot of instructors may never open this up, they may never make any changes, they may never need to, but for somebody who does want to have a little bit more control, I can see the different options here, and maybe I decide I actually don't want to copy my tags. Maybe I'm using this list in a different way and I want to start from scratch. So that's what is behind this advanced settings option. This is configured by you, and I wanted to include this slide as well because you can configure what is available to instructors. If you're not using the instructor rollover today, you do probably want to customize the out-of-the-box settings. This is also in the Getting Started guide that we'll provide. But when you click on Duplicate as library staff, you'll see all of the options. Whereas when your instructors click on it, they will only see the options that you've configured them to see. So I included this slide because you're probably testing it as library staff. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Behind the scenes, you can set what the defaults are going to be for each of these options, whether they should be copied or reset. So essentially copied is checked, reset is not. And you can also control specific statuses. I would very strongly recommend you don't display these statuses to your instructors. If you want them to be able to set your copyright statuses, that's certainly fine, but you can configure which options are displaying to them. I see a very nice comment in the chat. Excited about the shareable link option. It was never easy trying to explain to librarians or instructors why they had to use LTI links and couldn't use shareable links when the course was limited to course students only. Oh, actually, this comment has, this has not changed. So I'll say the shareable link option, it was never easy. Yeah, so we don't have, the shareable links still, the big thing that you get with LTI links is, no, that's okay, I'm glad you mentioned it. The big thing that you get with LTI links is the enrollment information. So the LTI link can pass the user information, it can pass the fact that they are enrolled in the course. So if the course is limited to course students only, then the LTI link is what gives that permission that says this is a student who is indeed enrolled in the course. So what we're looking at here actually doesn't fix that problem. They're still shareable links versus LTI links. The change is for those shareable links, if you are using them, would point to the updated version of the list. LTI links will always point to the right version of the list. So it's not a problem that you'd be facing already. The other problem is the shareable links in general. You can still hide those in the UI if you want to or need to. If you don't want instructors to be able to get shareable links out of the interface, you can still do that. But your specific problem, Jane, is not solved by this. So I'm sorry to disappoint here. Let's go through this workflow. So this is, I'm going to show this now from the quick start screen. So this is the new quick start screen. You may not recognize it. It looks very, very different from the current quick start screen. I was kind of kicking myself, or I am now kicking myself for not including a screenshot of the old one. It's a lot of text. You have to scroll down. It's a lot of text before you get to what you actually need. You have to scroll down to see the different options. So we really cleaned that up. And this is also another very good example of the types of changes that we made with the new UI. We really wanted this to be very straightforward, very clean, very easy for a new instructor to figure out what I'm supposed to do. So rather than burying you with text, we have very clear buttons. I can see those buttons. If I need more information, I have a little bit more text here, but very clear what my options are here to create a new list or to select an existing list. This select existing list, this is today the instructor rollover option. So you may have this hidden, you may have this not configured to display. You can certainly still do that if you want to. This bottom option here, ask your library to create your list. This actually answers the question in the chat. So will the option to upload a syllabus and have the library create a list based on that still be available? Yes. So this is it. We have it as kind of the third option. The less prominent option, you can hide this. So if you're not doing this today, you won't see it. We didn't make any changes to your existing configuration for what the options are there. So if you don't have it, you won't see it. But yeah, if I click on this button, it gives me a page where I can just upload a syllabus and it sends it to the library. So that workflow still exists. It works exactly the same as it does today. This is just the changes in the UI itself. So here I have the option to create a new list. That would create one from scratch. If I choose select existing list, then we get to a screen where I can choose my list. And this is a screen that I'm really excited about because this was very hard to do, or is very hard to do in the current UI. When you choose to roll over a list, you essentially just get a list of, I think, courses, actually, not even lists. All you get is the name. So it's very difficult to understand if you're rolling over the right thing. And you basically needed to do it and try it and see if it worked. And it was hard to undo if you made a mistake. So what we've done with the new UI is given you a whole lot more information about your lists. So here I have all of my lists. This is actually the My Lists page. So we can see all the information I would need to know if this is the right list, if this is the one that I'm looking for. I can see when it was last updated. I can see which courses is it associated to, whether it's published, who's teaching it. So you have all of that information to know that you're choosing the right one. And then when I get the right one, I can duplicate the list. So here I can make a copy of it. And this is actually the same screen that we saw before. So I can fill this information in. This is actually a different Alma environment where I have already customized this label. So rather than the rollover text, we have this to text, or you could have a year potentially. Again, I don't have to do anything. It automatically links it to the course that I'm working on, and I can just choose create list. If I change my mind, I can go back. So I can get out of this as well. And what I wanted to point out here is that there's actually a new option. So this does not exist today, this option to link the course to this list. So this is really great in situations where I am teaching multiple sections of the same course, or for whatever other reason, I want to use an existing list in my course. Rather than making a copy of the list, I can actually just link my course to this list. What we're essentially doing here is the Managed Course Association. We're essentially just adding a new course to the list that already exists, but we're doing that in a way that kind of walks through workflow. So again, very good example of the types of changes that we've made in the new UI. We're kind of walking instructors through what they need to do rather than, oh, if you need to use this in another course, then you need to exit out of this screen and go find it in the search and then go up into the menu and add your course. Nobody is ever going to figure that out without significant training. And again, this is just a great example of what we've really done with the new UI is made it much more obvious what you should do next, or how to do the common things that you need to be able to do. So this is the copy duplicate workflow, as well as the new option to just add a course association or link a course to an existing list. And that's it. I have demo, but I'm not doing a demo because we had a million slides. So we have time for questions now. We've been doing questions throughout. Feel free, if there's anything we haven't covered about this or really anything, you can put those in the chat. There's a question, why is the Ask Your Library to create your list as one of the larger options? I think this is probably why is it not one of the larger options, as it's very small. This one is not as commonly used. When we looked at the analytics about how people were using this option, this one was not as prominent. So that's why it's not as prominent. Today, it's not customizable in terms of how big this would be, or if it could be, one of these main buttons. You can change the option, so you can customize it so that it's not an option. You can customize it so that you only have create a list from scratch or ask the library to create the list, but you can't today turn this into something bigger if you wanted to make it bigger or more prominent. The other thing you can do, of course, is customize the text here. So if you wanted, different language, you can do that, but you can't make this one a more prominent one. While you are, can we make that a customizable feature? That's a workflow that we use. We don't, we as in, yeah, of course. So I will take this feedback. I'll take this as feedback and we'll talk about it. I will say, actually, this is maybe a good chance to say that there is a lot of feedback that we have gotten from our early adopters that we haven't incorporated yet. So there's a lot of things that we got that will not be in the September release. I mentioned 500 different feedbacks that we got. Really, really excellent feedback. I'll say this is good feedback as well. But when we were going through the type of feedback that we got from our early adopters, we were really trying to prioritize the things that would impact training materials. And I realized that this exact scenario is not a great example of this. We didn't actually get this from our early adopters, but we were really looking at things that would impact how you train your instructors. One of the pieces of feedback that we got is, as a good example, I think, is that the icons are small. There's icons running along the top of the page here, and when you're in it, there's some icons along the side. And we got the feedback that those icons were too small. But we have not changed that yet because we're really, wanting to get you ready to the point where you can train instructors. And we were thinking that if you train your instructors on how to use Leganto and later we make the icons bigger, you don't have to go back and retrain them. So we're really prioritizing the feedback that impacts kind of what you tell your instructors to do. So there will be a lot of changes that still come after the September release. There's quite a lot. There's not a release for October, so there's quite a lot that's going to be in the November release. And then after that, it will feel similar to how Leganto development felt, I'll say 2 years ago, because we've been doing a lot of behind the scene works on the new UI, but you'll see kind of gradual additions, adding new features, adding new functionality. We'll continue to develop on the new UI. But again, we were really trying to prioritize those things that impact how you train your instructors. Again, I realize this is not the best example, but I did want to make sure that you're aware of that there's a lot of feedback that we've gotten that we haven't yet incorporated into the new UI. Okay, so the link course to this list option looks great in your example of multiple sections. Would the analytics or usage stats be unique to each section? No, so the analytics are based on the list. So if you have one list, then you have, in that case, one set of analytics. So you'd see across all of the sections how students are engaging with those resources. Keep putting your questions in. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute because I want to find, actually, you know what? Maybe I can do this while I'm sharing. I want to find, yeah, let me stop sharing for a minute. I'm going to find the training materials that I mentioned about the workflows. So feel free to keep putting questions in the chat while I track this down. And I can share that information with you. So let me share again. And I'm just going to navigate to this so you can see where to look for it. So on the Knowledge Center in the Leganto section, there's a training page here. And there's a lot of materials in here that kind of get into the question that you are asking. So Leganto for library staff, this one covers a lot of those workflows. So things like managing tasks, working through citations in different ways. So if you're not familiar with this kit, this is a great resource. It was updated maybe a year ago or a year and a half ago. So if you've been using Leganto for a while, it may be worth taking a look at this training kit. And the other resource that may be helpful also in the training kit is in this Leganto workflows section. And this is actually the one that I was thinking of when you asked. No, that's not it. Sorry. Let's go webinars, demos. Where's my show all topics? There's a place where we have learning paths. This is another thing to be aware of. This is new as well. It kind of walks you through, reorganizes some of our training materials. This library processing workflows. This includes a lot of the videos from that kit, but also at the end of this, let's see if I can skip to the end. I don't know if I can. Is short loans. Sorry, I'm navigating my way around. Introduction to Library Workflows with Leganto. This is the one that I was looking for. So it's a 40-minute video, and it kind of goes start to finish. Like, your instructors have sent their stuff to the library. What do you do next? So if you are kind of wondering, or maybe you've been using it for a while, maybe you're new, if you're sort of wondering about kind of best practices, I just put this in the chat. I think this is a great video. It is a couple years old, but it's not significantly different because it's primarily about the library processing work. All right, so I see one more question. Does the new workflow support a list-based workflow, what we do currently? Yes. So when you're in Alma and you are working on a list, you can filter those. So you can filter your list to the ones that are not complete. I don't know how exactly you work today. You can also sort it by the date that they were added, but you can still work list by list and just see what is still to be worked on within that list. All right, I see we're over time. I'm gonna just share one last time this slide that has, oh, that's not a slide. Well, I can't get to it. Going to the very end, which has my email on it. I will share the recording with you. I'll also share the slides with you. So thank you to all of you for joining today. You were very close to getting access to the new UI. I hope you're excited about this. I'm really excited about it. And we will share more information with you soon. Thank you.